Welcome back, students. Continuing with our topic of contemporary management thinkers, today we are going to discuss the concept of management by objectives, which was introduced by Peter Drucker in 1954 when he wrote his book, The Practice of Management. Therein he discussed about this concept. Now, what does the MBO mean, or what is its major focus on? It says that you have to put your entire focus on the result that is to be achieved, on the goal that is to be achieved, rather than focusing on the activities that are being taken to perform them. So basically, it gave an idea that you develop some goals. These goals are to be developed for the entire organization. They are to be developed unit-wise, department-wise, and for each individual. And then you leave it to them to accomplish those goals. Your ultimate aim is to achieve that particular goal. The work method that is being applied to achieve that goal is to be decided by the individual or the team who has been given that task. So the organizational goals that have been developed, the strategic goals that have been developed, they have to be further classified into, or they have to be further converted into more specific goals, which will be for the department or units, and then into the personalized objectives for each individual. So if we define the management by objectives, you can say it is a process when the superiors and the subordinates, they identify the common goals that are to be achieved jointly. So they together identify the goals that are to be achieved. Then they define the major areas of responsibilities for each and every individual which are to be accomplished. In what terms it is identified, or in what terms the area of responsibility is defined? In the terms of expected results, that what is the final objective that is to be attained, what is the final result that is to be attained. And then once these expected results have been defined, then they are used as a benchmark for assessing the performance, right? So on the basis of these expected results, at the end, when the review is being done, the individual's performance will be assessed. This is the basic concept of the management by objectives. So if we look at the characteristics of management by objectives, the very first is that it is goal oriented, because the starting point of this concept of management by objectives is that you have to develop goals. When you are developing the goals, they have to be the individual goals, they have to be the departmental goals, the corporate goals, the company's goals, and all of them have to be synchronized. The goals have to be framed in such a manner that first the company's objectives or the company's goals have been fixed, the organizational goals have been fixed, and from that only smaller goals are being derived, so that they work in a synchronized manner and everybody is working towards the same long-term objectives. Then participation is very important when we talk about this process of MBO, because if you have seen the definition in the last slide, it says that it is a process where superiors and subordinates jointly identify the common goals. So you require the participation of all the individuals while framing of these goals, right? So the superior and the subordinate, they will sit together, they will define what is to be achieved, they will, the subordinates will have an opportunity to influence the decisions, they will have an opportunity to clarify, take clarification about their job from the superiors. It basically gives motivation to them, because they are themselves setting up their goals, they are themselves setting up their objectives, they are a part of the team when the objectives are being set up. So it gives them a motivation, it increases their morale to achieve those objectives. Then it says that you have to focus on the key result areas, because as again we discussed in the last slide, that the focus, the thrust area of MBO is on result rather than on work methods. So it says that you have to identify that what are the key result areas, what are the key results that are to be achieved, and the focus is to be kept on those key result areas. They will be your priorities. Then it goes in line with the systems approach. We have already discussed what we mean by systems approach, how MBO aligns with it. MBO says that you have to synchronize the individual goals with the organizational goals, and the organization has to be synchronized with its external environment. So basically what it is trying to do is, it is trying to bring about a goal congruence between the personal goals and the organizational goals, because it is saying that you make the broad goals, the organizational goals, and from therein only the individual goals are being derived, so that they become synchronized and all of them are working in the same direction. Then optimization of resources is very important, because the ultimate aim of this concept of MBO is that the physical resources as well as human resources, they should be optimally utilized. Right? How does it ensure that this is being done? Because there is an evaluation mechanism, and evaluation is being done for each individual on the basis of the goals that have been set up for that individual. And how that goals have been set up, how those goals have been set up, the individual himself or herself has set up those goals in consultation with their superiors. So optimum utilization of resources will be achieved. Then it is simple to follow this particular approach, because it can be used by all types of managers. That is why we say it is simple. You do not have to be at a particular level of management to use this. Any level of management can use this particular approach, and there is dynamism in this, because it can be adopted by any kind of business organization, right? Even if it is a social welfare organization, even if it is an NGO, they can also apply this particular approach. Multiple accountability. This is very important, because when you have formulated individual goals under this particular approach, when you have told everyone that which target you have to achieve, what is expected out of you, what is your key result area, you have told them all this, then that individual becomes accountable also for the performance. So rather than keeping a centralized point for accountability, that who will be answerable for the result, you have decentralized it. You have identified the goals, you have identified the objectives that are to be achieved for each and every individual. So that individual will become responsible and will become accountable for the accomplishment of that particular goal. So what will be the result of this? Because now everybody is accountable for their own task. So you cannot, do buck passing that, no, this was not my fault, this was because of somebody else, or I was correct and somebody else was wrong. You will not be able to do that, because your goal has been set up. Your target area has been set up, and it is your responsibility to achieve that. So you will be responsible for it. Then it is a comprehensive approach, because it gives importance to each and every component of the organization. It even talks about how organization has to deal with its external environment, and in relation to that the goals have to be set up. So it talks about the micro level, short term plans, it talks about the medium term plans, it also talks about the long range plans. So micro, macro level, everything is being comprehensively discussed and talked about in this particular approach. Now we will try to see that what is the process of MBO. Okay, what are the steps that are to be taken up in order to you can say implement this MBO approach in any organization. So first, as I have already discussed with you, is goal setting. When the goal setting is being done, first thing within that is that corporate goals have to be set up, the long-term objectives, the strategic goals, which have to be in compliance with the internal and external environment of the enterprise. You have to identify the key result areas, then these corporate goals will be set up. Then from these corporate goals, specific and short-term goals will be taken up for every department or every unit of the organization. After that, when the departmental goals have been discussed, when the departmental goals have been set up, then the superiors and subordinates have to discuss They have to do a free and frank discussion amongst themselves, and each individual will be told that what is being expected out of him or her, so that the subordinate, the individual, becomes fully committed to those goals. So again, I am repeating this, that when the individual goals are being set up, it is very important that while setting up those goals, that person is also a part of that discussion. So if the goals are being set up for me, I should be a party to discussion. My participation should be there while setting up the goals for me, right? That is establishing individual targets, which is the part of this first process, goal setting. Once these goals have been set up, the job of the superior or the boss does not end there. He or she, along with the subordinates, have to develop out the action plans. What are the action plans? That once you have set up the objectives, you try to find out that what activities will be required in order to attain these objectives. What would be the relationship between various activities? Which individual will be responsible for which particular activity? If there are two tasks which are to be done at the same time, you have developed a timeline for each activity, and if there are two tasks which are coming at the same timeline or at the same period in the timeline, and you have to choose out between that because your objectives, because your resources are limited, then you will have to decide and you will have to tell which thrust area you will have to choose, which will be prioritized. You will be giving priority to which particular task. Then you will be allocating responsibility for the specific results, and you will have to determine the resources that are required. Once the action plans have been derived, once the action plans have been finalized, then you have to implement those plans. Now, while implementing the plans, again, there are 3 steps, as you can see: diagnosis, preparation, and execution. Now, in this, what is done, the first thing is that you have to find out the resources. Diagnosis का क्या मतलब है? To find out. So while diagnosis, what you will be doing is, you will be finding out the planning system of the organization, the controlling system of the organization, the resources available in the organization, what is the competence of people who are working in the organization, so that you know that what is the existing structure. Now, on the basis of this, you will be doing the preparation. What will be the preparation? Training the people, educating the people, right? Then you have to determine that what would be the method of implementation, what will be the timeline for implementation, and telling your team members about it, that how they will go about it. And finally, the execution step will be there, wherein actually the things will be done, actually the task will be performed, right? So it is, you'll have to tell them how to participate, you will tell them how your goals have been set up, you will train them that how they have to work towards achievement of those goals, you will have to train them that they have to take up the responsibility for the goals being set up for them. Then the next step is periodic review and feedback. This is nothing but the concurrent control that we discussed earlier in one of the classes, that while the performance is being done, while your team members are performing their task, as a manager or as a superior, you will have to do a periodic review of their task, so that if they are going wrong at any point of time, you can correct them, you can bring them back to the path, and they move towards the correct direction. If you look at only at the end, because now you have given the goals to the individuals, now you have set up targets for the individuals and they are performing their own task. So it becomes all the more important for the managers to do a periodic review, so that if they are deviating anywhere from the track, you can bring them right on track in, at that point of time only, and do not wait till the end, because then it might become tough for them to achieve their final objectives. When this periodic review is being done, simultaneous feedback has to be given, so that the corrective measures can be taken up by the subordinates and with the assistance from the supervisor. And then last step would be the appraisal of the overall performance, which will be done at the end. So when you have set up their targets, when you have given them the objectives, at that point of time you had given them quantitative targets. Their targets, their objectives have already been put up in the quantified terms wherever possible. And now at the end, once that task gets completed, you will be doing an appraisal of the performance of these employees on the basis of these targets which were set up for them. So this is the entire process of MBO. Now obviously, like any concept, this MBO also has its own advantages and limitations, which we are going to discuss now. If we talk about the advantages, then the very first thing is that it leads to improved planning. Why it leads to an improved planning? Because you are having a participative decision making process. Your objectives are very explicitly defined. They are more realistic in attainable terms because the person who is going to perform the task, himself or herself, is participating while setting up of the objectives. So it leads to an improved planning. The coordination can be achieved because there is harmony of objectives. You are setting up the corporate objectives, from that the departmental objectives are being derived, and from therein the individual objectives are being taken up. So there is a coordination of efforts. It leads to motivation, as we have already discussed this earlier in this lecture only, that because people are themselves participating in the decision making part, they are getting a timely feedback. They are having a job enrichment because you are making them more responsible, so their responsibility area is increasing, their authority is increasing. All this leads to improved motivation and commitment of employees towards their targets. There are accurate appraisals because a target has been set up for them in the quantified terms, and the employees are aware right from the beginning that what is being expected from them, what is it that they have to achieve. So when the performance appraisal is done, it is much more accurate for them. Once the appraisals have been done, the people would come to know that what are my areas wherein I am lacking. What is it that I could not achieve? What is it that I need to learn? So it helps in better executive development of the employees, because the individuals, they get a self control. They themselves know that what are their shortcomings, or what is it that they need to learn, and it helps in a better executive development program. Similarly, when an organization has to bring about a change, because you have embedded this MBO approach in your organization, the thrust area of which is participative decision making, the focus is on participative decision making. So if an organization wants to bring about a change in its methods or in any of the areas, then it becomes easier for such an organization because people start trusting. They are highly motivated, their morale is high, their efforts are coordinated. So they will, themselves like to contribute towards the organizational change. It becomes easier for such organizations to cope up with these changes. Now coming on to limitations, the very first is problem of participation. So till now, whatever we have discussed, we have been repeating this, that you need to have participation of individuals in setting up their own goals. They themselves have to take the responsibility of achieving their targets. Now, what is the problem? The problem is from both the ends. At times, the employees might not be ready to take up more responsibility. And the other problem is that the managers, the superiors, they generally have a very half-hearted approach towards this participative decision-making process, because they feel that they are sharing their authority with their subordinates. Because if the MBO approach is not there, generally what is done, that the boss, the superior, they set up the target, and the employees are supposed to achieve that target. But if the MBO approach is being followed, then the superiors will have to involve the individuals in the decision making process. So they might feel that we are losing out our authority. So they might be having a half-hearted approach, and if this is done in such a manner, then the MBO approach is going to fail. Then there is difficulty in goal setting because it is at times tough to set up the quantifiable goals. हमने कहा quantitative goal set up करने चाहिए so that the performance appraisal becomes easier, it is accurate, but there might be certain jobs, there might be certain positions for which setting up quantifiable targets might not be possible. Similarly, inflexibility might come in because, in the changing environment, in the turbulent environment, you have to keep on changing the goals. The need might be such that you have to come up, you have to mold your goals that have been set up. But if you are going through the process of MBO, and once the goals have been set, because it's not easy to set it up, it's a lengthy process. You will have to consult with your subordinates, you have to sit with them, you have to discuss with them, then the goals are being set up. So it's a lengthy process, it's an expensive process, it's a time consuming thing, which is again one of the limitations. Because it is time consuming, because it is an expensive approach, so once the goals have been set, the managers might be very reluctant to bring about a change in it because of the turbulence in environment. And if this happens, then what will be the result? Although the environment is changing, there is a need that you change your objectives, but the managers are not doing it. Why? Because it is a time-taking exercise, right? So it might lead to inflexibility. Then another limitation is that if the people start emphasizing more on short-term goals, because this is generally the human nature that we look at the short-term perspective that immediately क्या required है, अभी हमें immediately organization में क्या achieve करना है, and if this is how people work, तो आप short-term goals पे सिर्फ focus कर रहे हो तो क्या होगा कि आपने long-term objectives के बारे में सोचा ही नहीं. आपने अगर लॉन्ग टर्म ऑब्जेक्टिव्स के बारे में नहीं सोचा है, सिर्फ शॉर्ट टर्म गोल्स के बेसिस पर ही आपने सारा एक्सरसाइज कर लिया एमबीओ का, then it might lead to a failure at a particular time in long run, right? क्योंकि आपने लॉन्ग टर्म गोल्स के बारे में सोचा ही नहीं था, आपने अभी छोटे टर्म के लिए सोच लिया कि ये कर देते हैं, और बाद में जब उसके वजह से प्रॉब्लम आएगी तब you will have to do the fire fighting कि now what should we do to make it correct. Last is self-defeating. Now this particular criticism was given by Harry Levinson, wherein he said that in the long run this becomes self-defeating because it is ignoring the emotional component behind motivation, right? He felt that if you have better interpersonal human relationships, if you have better communication, if you have better leadership styles in the organization, then they will be much more effective as compared to MBO. Fine. So MBO might lead to a very higher expectations of the employees, and if as an organization you are not able to fulfill those expectations, then the people might actually at the end become frustrated rather than getting motivated with this. So it will become self-defeating exercise. Now, the last thing that we are going to discuss is that what are the essential elements that may be fulfilled in order to implement the MBO in any organization. So the first is that the purpose of the MBO approach should be very clear to all the members of the organization. They should be having clarity that why we are having this MBO approach, why we are implementing this MBO approach, what is the use of it. Otherwise some people might just think ये तो हमारा ही काम बढ़ा दिया, अभी तक तो हमें सुपीरियर जो है बॉस जो है वो टारगेट सेट करके देते थे, अब ये कह रहे हैं कि टारगेट भी आप खुद सेट करो, आप इसमें भी पार्टिसिपेशन करो. So basically our work is increasing. So in order to counter that, you will have to explain them the purpose, that why you are implementing MBO in your organization. Then it is very important that the top management gives its wholehearted support, has a positive attitude towards the implementation of MBO, because it is flowing downwards, right? If the top management does not feel that this should be done, or if they do not give their support, then actually it might just become a fancy term that is being used, or actual में जो उसका benefit है वो नहीं होगा. Then next is that if you want to implement MBO in your organization, you must train your employees to that. You must tell them about the philosophy of MBO. You must train them about the intra-group, intrapersonal relationships. You must tell them that how a behavioral change would be required if the MBO approach is to be started. Their participation will be very important. If the employees are not allowed to play an active role, if they are not allowed to participate actively in the goal setting approach, then the entire exercise will go waste. So in order to have it effective, in order to make MBO effective, you will have to follow delegation and decentralization of authority and responsibilities. Feedback again is a very essential element because and feedback also has to be periodic review and feedback. You know, as we discussed in the process of MBO, it is very important that the superiors, they keep on checking periodically on the subordinates on their team that how they are performing, and if they at any point of time feel that they are deviating from their path, you immediately assist them in getting back to the correct path. Then if we want to have a successful MBO system, then one of the elements can be that the reward system, your pay structure can be linked to the MBO. How you will link it? By telling the subordinates that they will be paid incentives on the basis of their performance appraisal. And how the performance appraisal is being done? What is the benchmark? The objectives that have been set up under the MBO approach. So your reward system is being linked with the MBO approach. And last is the integration, wherein you have to integrate the entire MBO program within the organizational structure. So it should become embedded at each and every level of your organization, so that each and every employee is following that, so that each and every employee is aware of that, and wholehearted support is being given by the top management, by the superiors, by the subordinates. Then only the final results can be achieved. So if we have all these elements, then it will become a much more fruitful exercise by implementing the MBO approach. That is all about this concept of management by objectives, and I hope it is clear to you all. Thank you for the day.